Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. Get out, Julian whispered, his voice trembling not with fear, but with the terrifying seismic shock of a heart shattering all over again. He didn't look at the contract on the desk. He looked at the man standing in the center of his dimly lit restoration studio. The man who was supposed to be a ghost, a nightmare, a memory buried under 5 years of therapy and cheap whiskey. Damon Thorne stood there, the rain from the London streets glistening on his charcoal trench coat, looking exactly as devastatingly handsome as the day he had destroyed Julian's life. But something was wrong. There was no sneer. There was no cold, calculative recognition in those predatory gray eyes. Damon just tilted his head, looking at Julian with a polite, vacant curiosity, and asked, "I'm sorry, have I offended you? My assistant assured me you were the best restorer in the city." The air in the studio, usually smelling of turpentine, old varnish, and dried flowers, suddenly grew heavy with the oppressive weight of a presence Julian had sworn never to feel again. It wasn't just a man. It was a force of nature, an alpha, and not just any alpha, but the one who had claimed Julian, used him, and then discarded him like a broken toy to secure a merger with a rival conglomerate. Julian gripped the edge of his workbench, his knuckles turning white. The porcelain doll he had been repairing lay in pieces, a fitting metaphor. "Is this a joke?" Julian's voice rose, cracking around the edges. "You walk in here, after 5 years, and ask for a quote? Do you think I'm stupid, Damon? Or are you just that cruel?" Damon frowned, a genuine furrow appearing between his dark brows. He took a step forward, and Julian flinched, stepping back until his spine hit the shelves of paint solvents. The reaction was visceral, a muscle memory of pain. Damon paused, raising his hands in a gesture of surrender that looked alien on a man who had once commanded rooms with a snap of his fingers. "Mr. Vane, I truly apologize if we have a history," Damon said, his voice deep and smooth, rolling over Julian's nerves like velvet over gravel. "But I'm afraid you have me at a disadvantage. I was in a severe car accident 4 years ago. I lost a significant amount of memory. If I've wronged you, I don't remember it." The silence that followed was deafening. The ticking of the antique grandfather clocks lining the walls seemed to slow down. Julian stared. He searched Damon's face for the lie, for the flicker of malice, the smirk that used to appear right before Damon delivered a crushing blow. It wasn't there. The eyes were clear, confused, almost innocent. You don't remember," Julian breathed, the anger draining out to be replaced by a cold, hollow dread. "I don't," Damon confirmed. He reached into his coat and pulled out a business card, sleek, black, gold lettering. "My family." They filled in the blanks regarding the business, "my childhood." "But personal acquaintances?" "It's a blank slate. I'm here because I have a 17th century portrait that was damaged in the estate fire. I need it saved. They said you were a miracle worker." Julian let out a short, hysterical laugh. A miracle worker. He couldn't even fix himself. And now the universe, in its infinite, twisted sense of humor, had brought the architect of his destruction back to his doorstep, wiped clean of his sins, asking for salvation. "I can't help you," Julian said, turning his back. He picked up a rag, feigning busyness to hide the shaking of his hands. "Please leave." "I'll pay double," Damon said. The arrogance was still there, ingrained in his DNA, even if the memories were gone. "Triple." "It's not about money." Julian spun around, his eyes burning. "It's about the fact that you—" He stopped. What was the point? Screaming at this version of Damon was like screaming at a wall. This Damon hadn't dragged Julian through the mud of high society scandals. This Damon hadn't called him a temporary amusement before marrying a beta heiress. This Damon was a stranger wearing the face of his lover. "I see," Damon said quietly. He placed the card on the edge of the workbench. He didn't leave immediately. He stood there, inhaling deeply, his eyes narrowing slightly as he caught Julian's scent. A subtle mix of vanilla and distressed wood. A flash of something primal sparked in Damon's eyes, a biological recognition that his brain couldn't process. You smell familiar, like something I lost. Get out, Julian choked out, pointing to the door. Damon hesitated, his gaze lingering on Julian's flushed face, before he nodded curtly and turned on his heel. The bell above the door chimed, signaling his exit, but the scent of ozone and expensive cologne lingered, choking Julian until he slid down to the floor, burying his face in his hands. Julian thought he could hide. He thought he could refuse the job and retreat into his solitary life of fixing inanimate objects. But Damon Thorne was a CEO of a multinational empire. He didn't take no for an answer, memory loss or not. 3 days later, Julian found himself standing in the atrium of the Thorne estate. The job wasn't optional. Damon had simply bought the building Julian's studio was located in and threatened to evict everyone unless Julian took the commission. It was the kind of ruthless, manipulative tactic the old Damon would have used. It terrified Julian to see that the instinct remained even when the memories were gone. Mr. Vane. Damon's voice echoed from the top of the grand staircase. He descended slowly, wearing a casual navy sweater that softened his hard edges. It was unfair. He looked domestic. He looked like the man Julian used to dream of waking up next to, before the dream turned into a nightmare. I'm glad you reconsidered. I didn't have much choice, Julian snapped, gripping his tool case. You threatened my landlord. I incentivized him, Damon corrected smoothly, reaching the bottom step. He stopped just inside Julian's personal space. I need this painting restored, Julian. Can I call you Julian? Mr. Vane feels wrong on my tongue. Julian shivered. Julian, the way Damon said it, with a low, possessive growl on the vowels, sent a spike of heat straight to Julian's groin. He hated himself for it. He hated that his body remembered the pleasure just as vividly as his mind remembered the pain. Show me the painting, Julian said curtly, refusing to look Damon in the eye. They walked through the sprawling mansion. It was cold, sterile. The wife Damon had left Julian for was nowhere to be seen. Julian knew from the tabloids, the ones he pretended not to read, that the marriage had dissolved shortly after the accident. Rumor had it she left because Damon came back from the hospital different. Colder, unreachable. Damon led him into a private study. The painting leaned against the wall, covered in a cloth. My family says this portrait is of my great-grandfather, Damon said, his voice dropping. But when I look at it, I feel nothing. I'm hoping that if you clean it, restore the details. Maybe it will trigger something. Anything. Julian set his bag down. You really don't remember anything from 5 years ago? Fragments, Damon admitted. He walked over to the window, looking out at the sprawling gardens. Sensations. A feeling of intense hunger. A voice laughing. And a feeling of loss so profound it wakes me up in the middle of the night gasping for air. He turned to look at Julian, his gaze piercing. My family tells me I was happy, focused on business. But I feel like I'm mourning someone who isn't dead. Julian froze. He was right there. I'm right here, he wanted to scream. Asterisk, you're mourning me, you bastard. You're mourning the love you threw away. Asterisk instead, Julian pulled the cloth off the painting. It was a disaster. Smoke damage, tears in the canvas. It will take weeks, Julian said professionally. I'll need to work here. The canvas is too fragile to move. Good, Damon said instantly. Too instantly. I have a guest wing prepared. I have an apartment. It's an hour commute. You'll waste daylight. Damon stepped closer, the predator boxing in his prey. Stay. Please. The please was what broke Julian's resolve. The old Damon never pleaded. He demanded. This new iteration. He was dangerous in a completely different way. He was disarming. The weeks bled into a month. Julian worked in the study, the smell of solvents and oils becoming a permanent fixture in the pristine mansion. And Damon was always there. He brought Julian coffee in the mornings. He sat in the armchair in the corner, reading documents on his tablet, just watching Julian work. The silence between them shifted from hostile to companionable, then to something charged with static electricity. One rainy afternoon, the thunder was shaking the window panes. Julian was applying a delicate layer of varnish when a loud crack of thunder caused the lights to flicker and die. Julian gasped, dropping his brush. In the sudden darkness, he felt a warm hand grip his arm. "It's all right." Damon's voice was right beside his ear. "Just a fuse." Julian's heart hammered against his ribs. He could feel the heat radiating off Damon's chest. The alpha pheromones were overwhelming in the dark. Cedar, rain, and that unique musky scent that belonged only to Damon. "I need to find a flashlight," Julian stammered, trying to pull away. Damon didn't let go. His grip tightened, pulling Julian closer until their bodies brushed. "Why do you hate me, Julian?" Damon whispered. The question was raw, stripped of all pretense. "Every time I look at you, I see fear and hate, and underneath that, desire. It's driving me insane." "You don't want to know?" Julian whispered back, tears pricking his eyes. "I do," Damon insisted. His hand moved up Julian's arm, tracing the line of his shoulder, his neck, cupping his jaw. His thumb brushed over Julian's trembling bottom lip. "My family, they hid my past. I know they did. I found empty files on my personal server. Deleted emails. They erased someone from my life. Was it you?" Julian couldn't breathe. The truth was a dam waiting to burst. "You were a monster, Damon," Julian choked out. "You made me love you. You made me believe I was the only one. And then, when your father threatened to cut you off, you dropped me. You told me I was a liability. You married that woman and left me to pick up the pieces of my life." Damon went rigid. His hand on Julian's face froze. "I spent 5 years trying to forget the sound of your voice," Julian sobbed, the darkness giving him the courage to finally say it. "And now you're here, acting like a saint, looking at me like I'm precious. It's torture." Silence stretched in the dark room, heavy and suffocating. "I did that." Damon's voice was a horrified whisper. "Yes." Damon released him. Julian felt the loss of contact like a physical blow. He heard Damon step back, his breathing ragged. I don't remember doing it," Damon said, his voice sounding shattered. "But I know I'm capable of ruthlessness. I see it in the way I run the company. But to do that to you." Suddenly, the backup generator kicked in. The lights flared to life, blinding them both momentarily. Julian blinked, looking at Damon. The alpha looked devastated. Pale, his eyes wide with horror as he looked at Julian. Really looked at him, seeing the scars invisible to the naked eye. "I can't change the past," Damon said, his voice stealing, though his eyes remained vulnerable. "I can't restore the memory of us. But I know one thing." He stepped forward again, ignoring Julian's flinch. "Since the moment you walked into that studio, I have felt like a starving man finding food. I don't know the man who hurt you. I don't want to be him." "It's the same soul," Julian argued weakly. "Then let me redeem it," Damon vowed. He reached out, taking Julian's hand, pressing it against his chest, right over his beating heart. "Let me spend the next 5 years and the 50 after that making up for the 5 I stole." "It's not that simple, Damon. You're still an alpha CEO. I'm still just me. Your family will destroy us again." Damon's expression shifted. The softness evaporated, replaced by the cold, terrifying competence of the alpha. But this time, the weapon wasn't pointed at Julian. It was pointed at the world protecting him. "Let them try," Damon growled. "I'm not the puppet I was 5 years ago. I run this family now. And if they hid you from me to control me, they made a fatal error." He brought Julian's knuckles to his lips, kissing them with a reverence that made Julian's knees weak. "They underestimated how much my soul wanted yours. Even without a memory, it found you." The road to reconciliation wasn't a straight line. It was a jagged path over broken glass. Julian didn't forgive him overnight. He made Damon work for it. He finished the painting. He moved back to his apartment. and Damon courted him. Not with expensive gifts or grand gestures, but with consistency. Damon showed up. He waited. He listened. The turning point came at the Thorn annual gala. It was the event of the season, the very place where, 5 years ago, Damon had publicly snubbed Julian to stand beside his fiancée. Julian attended as the restorer of the family portrait, standing awkwardly by the champagne tower. He saw the whispers. He saw Damon's father, a hawk-nosed man with eyes like flint, moving toward him with 2 security guards. "Mr. Vane," the elder Thorn sneered. "I thought we paid you to disappear years ago." Clearly, the check wasn't large enough. "I earned every penny I have," Julian replied, holding his ground, though his heart raced. "I'm just here for the unveiling." "You're leaving," the father spat, "before you confuse my son again. We just got him back on track." "He's not a train on a track." A voice cut through the noise. "He's standing right behind you." The crowd parted. Damon stood there, resplendent in a tuxedo that fit like a second skin. He didn't look at his father. He looked at Julian. "Damon," his father warned, "this boy is a distraction." "This boy," Damon said, his voice amplified by the acoustics of the hall, silencing the room, "is the only thing in this entire room that is real." Damon walked past his father, shoulder-checking him with a deliberate, dismissive force. He stopped in front of Julian. The tension in the room was palpable. Everyone waited for the scandal. "I found the files, father," Damon said, not looking away from Julian's eyes. "I know you erased him. I know you manipulated the doctors after the crash to keep me medicated and compliant." He turned to the crowd, grabbing Julian's hand and lacing their fingers together. "My memory of the past is gone," Damon announced, his voice ringing with alpha authority. "But my future is standing right here. Anyone who has a problem with Julian Vane answers to me, and I assure you, I am much less forgiving than I used to be." He looked down at Julian, his expression softening into that new, terrifyingly open tenderness. "Did I do it right this time?" Julian looked at the joined hands, the strong, scarred hand of the alpha holding the artist's hand. The fear was still there, a ghost in the back of his mind. But for the first time in 5 years, the hope was louder. "Better," Julian whispered, a small smile touching his lips. "Much better." Damon leaned down, ignoring the hundreds of cameras and the gasps of the elite. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making you forget the man who broke you," he murmured against Julian's lips, "and making you remember the man who loves you." He kissed him. It wasn't the hungry, taking kiss of the past. It was a promise, a seal, a restoration of something that had been shattered, now put back together with gold, stronger for having been broken. And that is how the viper tamed the wolf. If you enjoyed seeing Damon burn the world down to protect Julian, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a husband who tried to kill you? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then,